Hey, what's up, Tigers? Welcome to On the Prowl alongside Ashley Pendergast and Amy McKenna. I'm Evan McDowell.
On the Prowl is a weekly rundown of all things sports at Clemson University.
Speaking of all things sports at Clemson, how about those Tigers? A huge congratulations to our football team for winning the national championship against Alabama, 35-31. Fortunately, Ashley was able to experience history from Tampa. How was your experience at the game?
So I'm going to be honest, this game was probably one of the best college football games I've ever had the privilege of attending in my entire life. At first, the officiating, as you'll know, is a little questionable for Alabama. But other than that, you definitely had the best of the best in this game, and I definitely think that both teams deserve to be there. Honestly, being there as a student and with my brother who just graduated last year, who's probably one of the biggest Clemson fans in the world, it was an incredible experience. As I was telling y'all earlier, I'm not a crier. I didn't even cry with Old Yeller, and I bawled my eyes out when we won that game. And just the entire...
You and my roommate have that in common.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to Nick, you big crybaby.
Just the entire atmosphere of the game, every Clemson fan was there. The ratio was like 70-30. It was absolutely incredible. It was just an amazing experience. I'm so glad I could be there for it. So aside from my national championship experience, let's just discuss one question. How did Clemson beat one of the most talented Alabama teams of all times?
One answer is Clemson had an effective game plan and Alabama did not.
At least not the right game plan. Clemson ended the Crimson Tide's 26-game win streak with 5 important factors.
The first factor being an imbalance in offensive approach. So if you look at the breakdown of the plays that Alabama ran, a vast majority of them were running plays, which when Bo Scarborough is healthy and in the game works pretty well, but when he goes down in the third quarter, that game plan doesn't
not
work
so
all
effective
that well.
anymore.
Which is very fortunate for us, because I have a feeling if Bo Scarborough would have lasted through the game,
Oh, no doubt.
Clemson may not have come home with that
Not
title.
so good.
No. We didn't seem to have a very good answer for Scarborough, so him going down in the third quarter, I think, definitely helped us from that perspective. And obviously, our offensive approach was very more passing oriented. We'll get into that a little bit later. And I think that kind of helped because Alabama always has a really good run defense, and Gallman didn't have the best day on the ground. So I think the difference in offensive game plans definitely played a huge role in our upset victory there.
So I would say the number 2 factor would be a lack of passing creativity. Alabama's freshman quarterback, Jalen Hurts, spent the majority of the first half tossing screen passes and failed at that. Clemson was able to read these passes fortunately, and it was extremely obvious that you had 2 very different types of quarterbacks in this game, one being a running quarterback and one being a passing quarterback. How do y'all feel about this?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of times you're not worried about Jalen Hurts' arm all that much. He doesn't have the cannon that you might want him to have. And I think their 2 longest pass plays came off of almost trick plays. One of them, of course, being a lateral to our Darius Stewart hitting O.J. Howard a little bit down the field. And then the other one, Howard ran almost a wheel route, and that was the long touchdown that we gave up, similar to the one that we gave up to him last year. And that was a little short crossing route, and I don't know if it was Stewart that was the wide receiver out wide with him, but almost set a screen for him, and it was blown coverage too. Nobody saw Howard on the sideline. So their 2 longest pass plays, Hurts didn't even have a lot to do with them.
Exactly.
So the short passes, I think, definitely kept our defense on their toes, but also close to the ball, which makes it easy to make a tackle and stop big plays.
And I think Saban always tends to pull out his trick plays on Clemson. Last year with the onside kick, I think he knows how good of a team Clemson is, and he has to pull out from all aspects of the field to be able to beat us.
Well, and I think a big difference is the offensive coordinator that we saw last year against Alabama is not the same offensive coordinator we saw this year against Alabama. Lane Kiffin got dismissed from the program a week before the national championship. So we had no idea coming into the game what Steve Sarkisian was going to do. And so Brent Venables, I think, probably had a difficult week kind of game planning for an offensive coordinator he might not have been prepared for. But I think Sark's lack of experience, shall we say, maybe in that situation, I think also helped us from a defensive perspective.
Well, I think also by them releasing their offensive coordinator a week before the game, that hurt both Clemson and Alabama because you have to get the players adjusted to this new offense.
Sure.
And that can be really difficult, especially for Clemson, who's trying to read their offense. And I think that's a really big challenge for both teams.
I think it might have even been strategic, like on purpose. They let him go early so it would throw Clemson off. I don't know, maybe that's just crazy, but
they could have been planning for it all along. We just,
yeah.
You just never know.
You never know with Nick Saban.
Our third point is there were too many penalties. Alabama collected 82 penalty yards on 9 infractions, an uncharacteristic amount for Nick Saban.
I agree with this. Throughout the game, especially being at the game, you see this horrible officiating, and they never once called anything in our favor the first half of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was for Alabama. They were giving them yards. They were giving us penalties, and I think that did affect the game a lot, but I also think that made Clemson play harder in the end.
True.
Well, and I think as far as from a penalty perspective, I'm looking at the numbers here. We only had 3 penalties for 35 yards. Bama had 3 times as many penalties. They had 9 penalties for 82 yards. So I think Alabama's lack of ability to not get penalized definitely hurt them. Obviously, we didn't get the benefit of the doubt from a lot of the refs, early in the season. If you look at some of our more penalized games, maybe the Pitt game and other games like that, the refs tend to throw the flags more on us, and that at least from a Clemson fan perspective, that's what we thought, and it kind of hurt us from that perspective. But definitely us being not penalized in this game, I think for sure had to help, no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely unheard of for Nick Saban to have this many penalties, but
Sure.
I also think the penalties had a lot to do with the defense getting tired, which is actually our last point. I think that's what determined the end result of this game. Clemson ran for 99 plays, and Alabama only ran for 66. And Clemson entered the fourth quarter having run more plays than Alabama had managed all season.
That's incredible.
That's insane. And I know throughout the season, a lot of people talked about how good Alabama's defense was. Some people tried to say Michigan's defense was better. I don't think that was true at all. I think a lot of people realized that Alabama's defense is probably one of the better college defenses that you'll see.
Mm-hmm.
So for them to play uncharacteristically against us 2 years in a row, maybe we could have taken advantage of that better last year. Maybe our lack of experience kind of played into that. So the fact that Nick Saban's defense can't seem to really figure us out for sure is a huge reason as to why we managed to drop 35 points on them.
It's the Clemson effect.
Well, it's the Hunter Renfrow effect.
Oh, Hunter Renfrow.
We'll get into that a little bit later as well.
I was actually able to meet Derrick Henry last year, and when I met him, he was with Christian McCaffrey and Deshaun, and he is a man amongst boys. And I think Alabama is always going to have a recruiting class like that, and I think that they are going to be the best of the best for a very long time to come. And that's also the Alabama effect.
Yeah.
Clemson has one now, but Alabama's had one for a very long time.
Legendary, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that's a huge deal. But even with those factors working against Alabama, Clemson still needed to score a touchdown with 1 second left to win, and we did it.
Wow, yeah. Exciting news came out yesterday when the 2017 football schedule was released. How do you guys feel about this upcoming season?
Well, just at first glance, when I looked at the schedule yesterday, and I'm pulling it up again now to get a refresher, I thought as far as comparing it to the last 2 seasons, I didn't think it maybe posed as big of a threat as last year's schedule and the year before that did. Nothing real intimidating, I guess, out there. I think our toughest game is probably going to be it's the 3rd game of the season against Louisville, and that's at Louisville, so that one's definitely going to be a tough one. But other than that, there's not a whole lot you need to be worried about. We open up the season September 2nd at home against Kent State. The week after that, home against Auburn. And then, like I said, at Louisville, home against Boston College, at Virginia Tech, home against Wake Forest, at Syracuse. Then we finally get a bye week, October the 21st. So I think having to play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row without a break could have a toll on us at some point. That Virginia Tech game in Blacksburg could be kind of tricky. You might be tired by then. But then after the bye week, we close out home against Georgia Tech, at NC State the first weekend in November, home against Florida State, home against the Citadel, and then we finish, as we always do, Thanksgiving weekend at South Carolina. So maybe a couple of good games in there. Louisville, Lamar Jackson's going to be back. They're going to be good again. Florida State, a lot of people have them preseason top 5 right now. Other than those 2 games, I really don't see anything that should trip us up, not to mean that it can't trip us up.
True.
But I don't know. Some entertaining games on the slate for sure, but then there's some that I might turn off at halftime, depending on how things go. So that's just my take on it.
In my opinion, obviously, I think Louisville, NC State, and Virginia Tech, all being away, are going to face some challenges for Clemson, especially the fact that we have to play Auburn and Louisville back to back.
Oh, yeah.
And I definitely, Auburn gave us a run for our money this year, and I think they're going to do the same thing this season because of the way they ended their season last year. I think that they're definitely growing as a program, and I think we're going to see a lot from them this year.
And Clemson's got a big old target on its back now.
Yes,
if it didn't before, we definitely do now.
And when you lose your number one wide receiver, your number one running back, and your number one quarterback, it's easier for somebody to say, yeah, we're going to beat you now since you beat us last year.
Absolutely.
So that, I think, to wrap up football, I got one little section, I guess we'll call it. I'm calling this the National Championship by the numbers. So just a couple of numbers from the National Championship. I know we already talked about it, but just to go back because we can't talk about it enough. A couple numbers here, 36, 5, 70, 26 million, and 13. 36 is the number of passes Deshaun completed in that game. To give you kind of an idea of how lopsided the passing game was in that game, Deshaun completed 36 passes, Blake Sims only threw 32.
Only through 32.
Through 32. No,
through
he didn't
32.
complete 32. He completed about half of those 32.
Whew.
So Deshaun threw 4 more passes than Blake Sims even threw. So from the passing perspective, like we were talking about earlier, just completely lopsided. It's not even fair. 5.
Very impressive.
No kidding. 5. This was the 5th game all year Deshaun didn't throw an interception. I know last year we didn't really have to worry about Deshaun holding on to the football. This year interceptions were a big problem for him. He didn't throw interceptions against South Carolina State, which he didn't play after halftime, so that didn't really count. Boston College, which also shouldn't count. Syracuse, and Wake Forest. So the games in which he didn't throw an interception weren't against very good teams. So the fact that he didn't throw an interception against this great Alabama defense, I think that is one of the more important factors.
Yeah. And he had to worry about Mike Williams catching the passes that Deshaun did try and complete and not get intercepted. And I think after Pittsburgh, after losing that game, you saw our team completely
flip the
around.
switch. Yeah.
My next number is 70. That was the most passes Deshaun threw all season. That actually wasn't against Alabama. That was against Pittsburgh. Against Alabama, he threw 56, which was the second most passes he threw in a game all year. So, again, another lopsided passing game statistic. 26 million was the number of viewers that watched the game, only a few 100,000 less than last year, so basically about the same audience for what that's worth. And then my final number is 13 because the guy who wears number 13 on our offense is probably one of the more important players in that game. Of course, Hunter Renfrow, 7 receptions, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. That was last year's national championship. This year, he went for 10 receptions, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns again. So if you're looking for Alabama defense's kryptonite, you got it in number 13, Hunter Renfrow.
What's crazy to me is Hunter Renfrow was a walk-on, number 1. Number 2, he was a quarterback in high school. He did not start playing receiver until he got to Clemson University. And I think that's an incredible skill for him. It just goes to show how great of an athlete he is.
That's insane. So that's all for football that we've got. That's in the past. This is in the present. There's other sports at this school besides football. Got to tell you about those. The men's tennis team. If you're not keeping up with Clemson men's tennis, you ought to, because they're off to their best start since 2014. They're under a new head coach, John Bache. His last name is spelled like Boetschch. But it said on the website how to pronounce it, Bache. New assistant coach, Ryan Young. So in their last 4 games, they have won against Georgia Southern, Citadel, Winthrop, and Davidson by a combined score of 20-5. And so what that means is to beat a team in tennis, you have 3 doubles games and you have 4 singles games. And so whoever wins 4 out of those possible 7 games wins the entire match, I guess is what it's called. Kind of like a 7-game series in basketball or baseball. So we beat Georgia Southern, Citadel, Winthrop, and Davidson, like I said, by a combined score of 20-5. So not very, I think the closest match was 4-3. I think that was Georgia Southern. Their next 3 home games are against Wofford, Michigan State, and Presbyterian. So if you're looking to check out some men's tennis, they will be at home for the next 3 games. You can get that opportunity.
Definitely need to go out and support.
I know. I need to go watch it. Apparently, there's some pretty good freshmen, and they're off to a decent start. So I need to start supporting the tennis team. Speaking of tennis, the women's tennis team doing about as well as the men's team. They're 2-0. They beat Charlotte and Charleston Southern. They swept Charlotte, 7-0. Okay, didn't
Impressive.
That's not bad.
Very impressive.
And then 6-1 over Charleston Southern. So 2 pretty impressive wins for the women's tennis team. They play this weekend in Nashville in the ITA kickoff. Friday they will play against Kansas, and then Sunday they will play against either Vanderbilt or Virginia Tech, depending on who wins in that match.
And they have 2 home games next weekend?
Next
correct?
weekend, yeah, 2 home games against South Carolina and Georgia. So a couple of rivalry women's tennis matches if you're looking to get your tennis fix next weekend.
That's right.
And that's all I got for tennis. And I got to tell you, I'm sick, and it's not just this ear infection I'm talking about. I'm sick of bad basketball being played around this campus. So I need somebody to tell me something good about basketball. Do you have?
We don't have
go,
much
baby.
good. There's not much good to talk about. I'm so sorry.
It's just, and it's not even men's. The women's team, if you can believe this, the women's team is actually playing worse than the men's basketball team is right now.
It is rough.
It is so.
It's just bad basketball all around.
It's so bad. It's so bad. So just to give you an idea of how bad this basketball is, the men's basketball team will start off with the best of the worst. They're on a 6-game losing streak. They're 1-6 in the ACC.
1-6.
1-6. That means they won 1 ACC game.
However,
their first ACC game. It was at Wake Forest.
It is the ACC.
It is the ACC.
Yes. And
And
Toughest
we're,
basketball.
we're the little dog in this big dog world of ACC. So,
I think we were
but 1-6,
We were
like
supposed to be so good. Not so
1
good,
and
but we were
6
supposed to be
is
better this year.
not so good.
I think I saw latest tournament projections. Joe Lenardi had us at a 7 seed, and now he's got us missing the tournament. So the 6-game losing streak not helping us out too much.
Oh no.
Saturday they play at Pittsburgh, so we might as well chalk that one up as a decent try. And then next Wednesday they have a home game against Georgia Tech, and next Sunday they play at Florida State. So that's the men's basketball next 3 games.
I know y'all have seen the high school basketball player, correct?
Zion?
Is that-
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man.
So there's actually rumors that he may or may not be committing to Clemson.
We've offered him. He wants. He's seriously considering.
That
this.
would be a complete game changer.
I think that would help us a lot.
And honestly, if I were him, I would 100% commit because the entire program
Would be around
Well,
him.
yes, I love
You're already
Clemson.
here.
Number one. Number one, I love Clemson. Number 2, you would be the star of the program as a freshman, as a sophomore, as a junior,
With
as
Blossom
a senior.
Game leaving, probably.
Exactly.
Yep.
I mean, he's probably better than Blossom Game.
That's
you know.
insane.
Phew.
Have you seen any of his highlights?
Not yet.
Oh my god, I will have to pull
You
them
know,
too.
up.
I've stalked his Instagram, people. You need to get on there. He has some great highlight videos. They're incredible. He is probably the most talented basketball player I have seen in a very long time.
My buddy Joe went to
Wow.
one of his games. Shout out Joe, by the way. And he had his whole Snapchat story that night was just of Zion Williamson, and it was warm ups. It was in the game, and it was towards the end of the game. Garbage time. It doesn't matter. And it was insane. He's a
One-handed
freak of
dunks.
nature. So
Hey, we'll take
dunks.
anybody.
Yeah.
no kidding. So
Exactly.
talented, we'll
we
take
just
'em.
need some talent here. So.
Brad Brownell, if you're listening, go visit Zion Williamson right now. Moving on to women's basketball, because they're even worse. They're on a 7-game losing streak right now, and they have 0 ACC wins. So at least the men's team can brag and say, yeah, we won 1 ACC game.
Man.
The women's team showed some promise earlier this year. They started off 10-0, and since then they have gone 3-9.
3-9.
Not good. If you win 33% of your games, that's not going to get you anywhere.
Come on.
Not even NIT. That's bad. That's bad. Their next games, I have one tomorrow, January the 26th, at 7 p.m. home against number 9 ranked Louisville. Good luck, ladies.
It's a tough one, that's for
and
sure.
then this coming Sunday, the 29th, they will be playing at home against Georgia Tech at 2 p.m. So if you think the women's basketball team isn't doing very well because you're not supporting them, then you need to go support them tomorrow
basketball.
and Sunday.
Amy, I know
It's
you
fun.
had a quote earlier from Coach Brownell, correct?
Yes, so after the UVA game, after it was last Saturday, Coach Brownell put some words out for the men's basketball team. He said that his team was not feeling sick enough about losing and that they were content with losing and that they're not going to get anywhere if they aren't bothered by the fact that they're losing so much. So, also, if basketball players, if you're listening, we want you to win.
Pay attention.
Miles Davis.
We're talking to you.
Yes, so.
The Tigers will break for the next 4 days before taking on Pittsburgh on Saturday, January 28th. And a huge shout out to my former elementary, middle, and high school teammate or classmate, Lyles Davis, who walked on the basketball team last year. He does get in sometimes, and he's awesome. So next time you go in, just chant Lyles Davis and see if he can get in.
Get the token white boy on the bench.
Exactly. And he's blonde, so you can't miss him.
All right, that's enough of the bad news. Let's get into some good news. The track team has got a hot start recently. Amy, tell us about the track team.
So the Tigers raced in the Clemson Invitational 2 weeks ago. Ursula Farrow ran the fastest 800-meter time in the country to claim the Clemson Indoor Track and Field Complex facility record. The performance marks the 4th record broken this season by a Tiger and the 8th facility record broken within the first 2 weeks of Clemson unveiling the new facility.
So I did hear something. I'm a campus tour guide, and one of my fellow tour guides, his name's Micah. Shout out, Micah. I'm just giving shout outs all over the place today. He is on the track team, and he told me on past Sunday that Clemson's new indoor track is the fastest track in the country as far as college tracks go, which means that the slope of the track itself lends itself to being able to run faster. So I guess that's what's helping Miss Farrow there set some records, the slope of the new track and how fast it is. So that's my fun fact for the day. It's not that fun, but it's a fact.
Well, I ran track and cross country in high school and middle school, and the courses and the tracks that were the fastest, you always wanted to go there. So I'm telling you, with the opening of this new indoor facility, we're gonna have a lot more track and field around here, and I think that's really cool for us.
And maybe that could build up a little fan following. I've never been to a track meet. I can't tell you how many people are at a track meet.
They're very long.
I need to be one of
that.
those. Well, you don't have to stay for the whole thing.
Long.
I probably wouldn't stay for the whole thing, but I'm gonna start going to track meets now.
Yeah, we definitely all need to go. We have a very impressive track team.
So what the men's and women's basketball team lack in wins, our track team and our men's and women's tennis team are making up for.
Woohoo! Yay, small sports.
We're a tennis school now.
All right.
And so that wraps up our information for this week. And now we're going to move on to what we call our final segment. It's our final segment. We call it Final Prowl. And so each week we're going to have a different topic to discuss, each of us taking about 2 minutes. This week's topic is your favorite sports moment. And Ashley she copped out. She took everybody sitting at this table's favorite sports moment.
I called it.
Just go ahead.
So basically, my all-time favorite memory for sports and experience would be the national championship game this year. I'm sorry, guys, I had to say it.
It's okay.
That's all right.
And I'm sure it's all of ours too. We all are students at Clemson. We've all followed football, and honestly, it is probably any Clemson football fan's favorite sports memory since 1981.
Right.
And hopefully not another 30-something years.
Yes.
I'm hoping that we're going to go back soon, and I'm just really fortunate because I was able to share it with my brother and my mom, who both graduated from Clemson, and my dad, who has helped me pursue my career in sports broadcasting. So he's literally taught me everything I know about football, and I got to sit next to him, and the whole time me and him just kept saying, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh," the whole last 30 seconds of this game, especially the last second of the game, since it pretty much took 5 minutes. But that's all we could say was, "Oh my gosh," and tears were streaming down my face. Like I said earlier, not a crier, but I cried for a very long time after that game. I cried.
Yeah, you and my roommate have that in common. Nick, you cry. I already shouted Nick out, but you cried. I'll go next. I have a tie. One of them would be my favorite sports moment that's happened on a field, and one would be my favorite sports moment that's happened off the field. So the on the field, and I was very young, and I barely remember this, but it's a huge sports moment in the last 15, 16 years. If you remember, the first sporting event that took place after the 9/11 terrorist attacks was a New York Mets game. And of course, the stadium was full. There was a ton of emotion in the air. There was a great pregame ceremony with the flag and the military band and all that. And towards the end of that game, I don't think it was the 9th inning, but towards the end of that game, Mike Piazza, who was the Mets catcher, probably one of the best hitting catchers in baseball history, absolutely creams a ball to dead center field. And you can just see, as soon as that ball takes flight, you can see the people in the camera shot kind of behind home plate. And then as the camera turns and you can see the ball flying out of center field, you can just see everybody is just so overcome with emotion, because it's just a home run, but with the stakes and the scenario and the Mets winning the game over the Braves that night, it brought everybody together, and that's what sports does. It brings people together, and I think that is probably one of the more perfect examples of sports bringing together not just a community and not just a small group of people, but the entire country, because there's nothing else happening that night. Everybody's watching this Mets game. First thing after 9/11, and it was just an insanely emotional moment for everybody involved, whether you were a Braves fan or not. And I just watched the highlight of it on YouTube before we started, and I got goosebumps about it. So I thought that was an on-the-field sports moment that I think should live on for a long time. And then my off-the-field sports moment kind of a dark horse, I guess, for my favorite sports moment. The 2015 Sports Emmy Award show, Ernie Johnson won the award for Outstanding Studio Host as the host of NBA on TNT. And he gets up there with his wife, and he's given his acceptance speech. And about 30 seconds into it, he's saying, thanks so much, everybody, for supporting me and my wife and all this. And he drops this line that gives me goosebumps every time. He says, he looks at the award, and he picks it up, and he looks at it, and he says, there's only one place where this belongs, and that's on the mantle at Stuart Scott's house. And Stuart Scott, of course, died, at the end of 2014, very, very early 2015. And his daughters were in attendance at that award show. So Ernie Johnson calls his two daughters up, and they speak, and it's just a ridiculously emotional moment again, like I said. But that one line that there's only one place this belongs, and that's on the mantle at Stuart Scott's house. I can hear Ernie Johnson saying that now. And Ernie Johnson's one of my favorite sports broadcasters. He's a great guy, and I just think that is a true testament to, again, sports bringing people together, not only in times of tragedy and sadness, but all the time. So I just love both of those moments for basically the same reason.
Well, I grew up a Duke men's basketball fan, so we're pretty prestigiously good. So not to
not right now.
But so we've won a few national championships in the last 10 years. And that's like a thing that I can bond with my dad over. And so whenever we would watch those games, I'd be 2 feet away from the television and just soaking it all in and crying because, sports. So I just love when your favorite team wins, that's your moment.
Well, yeah,
so.
That's not just Duke basketball. It's Duke basketball for you, but yeah, that's everybody.
Yeah,
when your favorite team wins, it's a good time. So that does it for this week's edition of On the Prowl. Be sure to catch us next week where we'll bring you all the sports information from around Clemson's campus that you could possibly want. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Yo, that was so good.
It was.